For decades, Neanderthals were portrayed as primitive humans who could barely survive without brute strength. But a remarkable discovery from a Siberian cave is forcing scientists to rethink that image. Researchers examined a Neanderthal tooth dating back roughly 59,000 years and found something extraordinary: evidence that the tooth had been deliberately drilled with a stone tool. The damage is not consistent with normal wear. Instead, it suggests someone intentionally worked on the painful tooth. If that interpretation is correct, this could represent the earliest known example of invasive dental treatment. But who performed the procedure and why? To understand what this discovery really tells us about Neanderthal medicine, we need to look closely at the evidence. The tooth was recovered from Shagarskaya Cave in the Altai region of Siberia, a site where Neanderthal remains have been preserved for tens of thousands of years. What makes this specimen unusual is the pattern of damage. Researchers found evidence of a large opening and traces consistent with repeated contact from a hard object. The position of the damage is especially important. It is located where an attempt to reach the inside of a painful tooth could make sense. The researchers also considered other explanations, including accidental damage from chewing or natural wear. But the evidence points toward deliberate manipulation. We cannot watch what happened 59,000 years ago, but the tooth has preserved a remarkable trace of it. But finding damage in an ancient tooth is not enough to prove that someone was treating it. Scientists had to ask a much harder question. Could this pattern have formed naturally? The researchers examined the shape, position, and direction of the marks and compared them with damage caused by normal chewing and accidental breakage. The unusual opening and associated grooves are difficult to explain simply as everyday wear. Their location also matters because it would have allowed access toward the inside of the tooth. This does not prove that Neanderthals understood dentistry in the modern sense, but it does provide strong evidence that one of them deliberately manipulated a painful tooth using a hard tool. If the tooth was deliberately treated, another question becomes even more fascinating. What did the procedure actually require? A Neanderthal would have needed to recognize that something was wrong, locate the painful tooth, and use a tool with enough force and precision to alter it. There was no medical equipment, anesthesia, or dental chair. The procedure would have been extremely uncomfortable and risky. Yet the individual survived long enough for the evidence to remain in the tooth. We should not imagine a modern dentist in a prehistoric cave. But this discovery suggests something surprisingly sophisticated. Neanderthals could recognize a physical problem and attempt a practical solution using the materials available to them. The dental discovery is only one part of a much bigger story. At El Sidrón Cave in northern Spain, scientists found another intriguing clue hidden in something most people would never think to study: ancient dental plaque. Inside this hardened material, researchers identified traces of plants that Neanderthals had eaten. Some of these plants had very little nutritional value and included intensely bitter species. That is important because bitter plants can contain biologically active compounds, and several of the species identified at the site have properties associated with pain relief, digestion, or other medicinal effects. The evidence does not prove that Neanderthals understood medicine the way we do today, but it suggests they may have learned, through observation and experience, that certain plants affected the body in useful ways. And that raises an even bigger question. How much traditional knowledge could Neanderthals have developed without leaving written records? But medicine is not only about treating injuries or using plants. It is also about caring for someone who cannot survive alone. And this is where the Neanderthal story becomes even more surprising. Archaeologists have found individuals who suffered severe injuries, chronic illnesses, or physical disabilities and still survived for years. Some could not have hunted or moved normally without help from others. Their survival suggests that other members of the group shared food, protected them, and helped them move. We cannot know exactly what that care looked like, because Neanderthals left no written instructions. But their bones provide something remarkable, evidence that compassion and cooperation may have been essential parts of Neanderthal life. And that means their approach to survival was not simply individual, it was deeply social. When we put all this evidence together, a very different picture of Neanderthal life begins to emerge. They were capable of observing their surroundings, learning from experience, and responding to physical problems in practical ways. They also depended heavily on cooperation. An injured or disabled individual who could no longer hunt effectively could still survive because other members of the group shared food and provided protection. This does not mean Neanderthals had doctors, hospitals, or a formal medical system. We have no evidence for anything like that. What the evidence does show is something more fundamental: practical knowledge, social learning, and care for vulnerable members of the group. These abilities may have existed long before written language, cities, or organized civilization. And that changes how we should think about Neanderthals, not as primitive humans, but as intelligent communities adapting to a difficult world. So, were Neanderthals really doctors? The honest answer is no, not in the modern sense. There is no evidence of hospitals, professional healers, medical textbooks, or an organized system of medicine. But calling their behavior completely primitive would also be misleading. The drilled tooth suggests deliberate intervention. The plant remains suggests that some Neanderthals may have recognized useful effects of certain foods and plants. Their healed injuries show that injured individuals could survive with support from others. Together, these clues point to something much older than formal medicine: practical healthcare based on observation, experience, and cooperation. Neanderthals may not have understood disease the way we do today, but they clearly interacted with pain, injury, illness, and survival in surprisingly sophisticated ways. The most important part of this story is not whether we can call a Neanderthal a doctor. The real discovery is what the evidence tells us about their ability to solve problems. A person was apparently willing to endure a painful procedure to deal with a damaged tooth. Other Neanderthals may have experimented with plants that affected the body, while injured members of their communities survived because others helped them. None of these discoveries proves that Neanderthals had modern medicine, but together, they challenge the old image of a species driven only by instinct. They show individuals capable of observation, learning, adaptation, and cooperation. And perhaps that is the most surprising medical discovery of all. Long before hospitals existed, people were already trying to help one another survive. For generations, we imagine Neanderthals as primitive survivors who lacked the intelligence to understand their own bodies. The archaeological evidence tells a more complicated story. A modified tooth, possible medicinal plants, and the survival of seriously injured individuals all point toward observation, experience, and cooperation. We should not turn these clues into a fantasy about prehistoric doctors, but we should not dismiss them either. Neanderthals lived in a difficult world, and they developed practical ways to deal with pain, injury, illness, and survival. Perhaps the biggest lesson is not that Neanderthals invented medicine. It is that the roots of human healthcare may reach much deeper into our past than we ever imagined.